Welcome to MC Noctis, where every shadow has a story. Tonight, that shadow is hungry, and it is wearing the face of someone a daughter cannot bear to lose. At 4:12 in the morning, I watched my mother's spirit crawl out through her own mouth. Her body remained asleep in room 12, smiling beneath an oxygen mask, but something that looked almost like her unfolded itself above the bed, thin as smoke and wet with strands of black saliva. It turned toward the hospice hallway. Then it smelled the dying. By sunrise, 4 of my patients were dead. One had no liver, another had no kidneys. There were no incisions, no blood, and no footprints in the snow outside their locked windows. My mother, who had been dying of pancreatic cancer, asked for bacon and eggs. Her skin had regained its color. Her hands had stopped shaking. The tumor beneath her ribs had shrunk enough for the doctor to call it impossible. I already knew it was not a miracle. 3 nights earlier, I had seen the first thing come for her. I had heard it feeding in the dark. And when I understood that another patient's death had purchased my mother one more morning, I chose not to tell anyone. That silence was all the invitation it needed. An old Lao spirit healer, staying beside his sick sister, called the creature Phi Pop. He said it lived as an ordinary person during the day. At night, its hungry spirit abandoned the body and searched for anyone weakened by sickness. It slipped through keyholes, air vents, even the space between 2 breaths. Then it ate what the body could no longer defend. He also said a Phi Pop could be expelled only before dawn, while its human body lay empty. But the ritual required the host to reject the thing keeping them alive. My mother did not want to reject it. Neither did the doctor who discovered what it could do. Before that blizzard ended, one of them would offer the Phi Pop an entire building full of helpless people. The other would ask me to decide how much of my soul I was willing to cut away to keep my mother breathing. My name is Claire Mercer. I was the senior night nurse at North Pines Hospice, 40 miles outside Redwater, Minnesota. North Pines had once been a Catholic boarding school. The patient rooms were converted dormitories, and the chapel became a physical therapy ward no one used after dark. In winter, snow buried the lower windows and made the building feel less like a place of comfort than something the world had tried to forget. My mother entered room 12 on the 2nd day of February. Evelyn Mercer was 63, a widow, and the most stubborn woman I had ever known. Pancreatic cancer had reduced her to 90 pounds. She could no longer keep down water. Dr. Samuel Wren gave her 5 days, perhaps 7 if her heart remained strong. I should not have been assigned to her floor, but North Pines was short-staffed. The county roads were closing, and Mother refused to let a stranger clean her or change the pump delivering morphine into her arm. "You changed my diapers," I told her. "Let me return the favor." She smiled without opening her eyes. "You always were terrible at jokes." There were 6 other patients that week. Most were unconscious. One was Marley Sivan, an 80-year-old Lao American woman dying from heart failure. Her younger brother, Calm, slept in a chair beside her every night. He was a narrow man with silver hair and steady hands. He carried a cloth bag that smelled of smoke, citrus peel, and bitter roots. The storm arrived shortly after midnight. By 1, the phones were dead. By 2, snow had sealed the ambulance entrance. At 2:37, the call light came on in room 9. Mr. Donald Reese had not spoken for 2 days. When I entered, he was sitting upright, staring at the air vent above his bed. "There's a woman inside it," he whispered. I checked his oxygen. I checked his pupils. I told him medication could make shadows seem alive. "She isn't a shadow," he said. "She's smelling my stomach." Something moved behind the vent cover. The metal bowed outward once, as though a hand had pressed against it from inside. Then the screws began turning. 1, 2, 3. I reached for the emergency alarm. Every light in the room went out. In the darkness, a wet mouth began chewing. It was not coming from Mr. Reese's bed. It was coming from above me. When the generator started, the vent was closed. The screws were back in place. Mr. Reese lay flat on his pillow. His eyes were open. His abdomen had collapsed so deeply beneath his ribs that for one irrational second, I thought someone had removed everything inside him and pulled the skin tight over the emptiness. From the hallway, I heard my mother laughing. Mother was standing beside her bed without assistance. 12 hours earlier, 2 orderlies had needed to turn her. Now she held her IV pole with one hand and ate strawberry gelatin with the other. "I was starving," she said. There was a dark stain at the corner of her mouth. I wiped it with gauze. It smelled of iron and spoiled meat. Dr. Wren examined her at dawn. He pressed the tumor beneath her ribs, checked the medication pump, then asked me to bring the portable ultrasound. The mass was smaller. Not slightly smaller. Half its recorded size. "Equipment error," he said. He scanned her 3 more times. Across the hallway, Donald Reese's body waited for the funeral home. His death should not have surprised anyone. He had arrived at North Pines with end-stage liver disease. What surprised Dr. Wren was that the ultrasound could no longer find his liver. There was no wound, no internal bleeding. The organ had not been surgically removed. It simply failed to appear where a liver had been 12 hours earlier. Dr. Wren locked the machine in his office and ordered me not to discuss it. "Families hear one strange detail and invent 10 more," he said. "This facility cannot survive an investigation." I agreed because I wanted to agree. Mother lived through the day. That evening, she asked for a hamburger. At 1:15 the next morning, Mrs. Calder in room 7 began screaming that someone was kneeling on her chest. I ran toward her room, but Mother caught my wrist from her bed. Her grip was stronger than mine. "Don't go in there yet," she said. "Why?" Her eyes were still closed. "Because it hates being watched while it eats." I pulled free. The hallway seemed longer than it had a moment before. The fluorescent lights went dark one by one ahead of me, each extinguished bulb marking something moving toward room 7. Mrs. Calder screamed my name. Then she made a sound I had heard only once before, while assisting in emergency surgery. The sound of air escaping a body cavity. I opened her door. A shape crouched on her bed. It had a woman's grey hair and my mother's narrow shoulders, but its spine bent upward like the legs of a spider. Its face was buried below Mrs. Calder's ribs. The shape raised its head. Something pale and pulsing hung between its teeth. It looked directly at me. It had my mother's eyes. I stepped backward and shut the door. That is the truth I hid. I did not call for help. I stood in the hallway and listened until the chewing stopped. When I returned to room 12, Mother was asleep. Her cheeks were pink. For the first time in 6 months, her breathing made no sound at all. Mrs. Calder died at 1:22. Her kidneys were gone. Dr. Wren searched for them with the ultrasound, then with his hands, pressing harder and harder into the soft hollows of her back. He stopped only when he realized I was watching him. Who entered this room? I told him no one. I did not tell him what I had seen. At breakfast, Mother finished 2 eggs, oatmeal, and half an orange. She looked 10 years younger. The yellow had vanished from her eyes. When I asked whether she remembered speaking to me, she folded her napkin into smaller and smaller squares. "People say strange things on morphine," she said. "You aren't on morphine anymore." She looked at me then. Maybe that's why I'm getting better. I checked the security recordings while she slept. North Pines had cameras in the halls, but not in patient rooms. At 1:14, the recording showed me leaving the nurses' station and entering room 12. I stayed inside for 11 seconds. Then I stepped back into the hall. Except it was not me. The woman on the screen wore my scrubs and carried my badge, but her arms hung below her knees. Her bare feet faced backward. She crawled up the wall, folded herself into the ceiling vent, and disappeared. At the same time, another camera showed me running toward room 7. There were 2 of me in the hallway. I replayed the footage until nausea forced me away from the screen. Behind me, someone said, "That is not your face." Kam Suvan stood in the doorway. He pointed at the figure entering the vent. "It wears what the witness trusts," he said. "Look again at the glass." The dark screen reflected the nurses' station behind the crawling figure. In that reflection, the thing did not have my body. It had Mother's. Kam asked me how many people had died since she arrived. I told him 2. "How many times has she become stronger?" I did not answer. He closed the office door and removed a length of black cotton cord from his cloth bag. 7 knots had been tied along it. Each knot was stained with orange powder. "Where I was born," he said, "we have a name for a hunger that lives inside a living person. Phi Pop. During the day, it hides behind the host's eyes. At night, it leaves the flesh and eats the organs of the weak." I told him my mother was not a monster. "No," Kam said, "but she has discovered that a monster can make her well." Through the office wall, a call bell rang. Room 12, Mother's room. Kam looked toward the sound. "She knows we are speaking about her." The bell rang again. Then all 7 patient lights came on at once. Cam did not call himself a shaman. He said that word had been used by too many people who sold mystery to strangers. Before coming to America, he had trained under his grandfather as a spirit healer. He had not performed a ceremony in 31 years. "Why stop?" I asked. He looked through the window in the office door toward his sister's room. "Because sometimes a healer succeeds, and people still hate him for the price." He explained that sickness loosens the boundary between body and spirit. A Phi Pop could smell that weakness. It entered homes as breath, shadow, or appetite. At first, the human host might remember only dreams. After several feedings, the host began to taste the victim's food, recall their memories, and feel strength returning to diseased flesh. Eventually, the host helped it hunt. "Can you drive it out?" "Only if your mother wants to live without it." The ritual required 7 lengths of knotted cotton to close the body's 7 exits while the Phi Pop was away feeding. Cam would lure the spirit into a clay vessel containing a warm animal heart. Before the final knot was tied, the empty body would call to its wandering spirit. The host had to refuse it. If Mother invited it back, no prayer could separate them. If we destroyed her empty body before it returned, the spirit would lose its home and be forced into the vessel. "Destroyed?" I asked. Cam did not soften the word. "Killed." I stood so quickly that the chair struck the wall. He caught my arm. "I am not telling you to kill her. I am telling you what happens if she chooses the hunger." The office door opened. Dr. Wren stepped inside. He had heard enough. I expected him to call security. Instead, he locked the door behind him and asked Cam whether the Phi Pop could enter a different host. Cam stared at him. "Why would you ask that?" Dr. Wren sat down and removed a bottle of pills from his coat. His hands shook as he opened it. I had assumed the tremor came from exhaustion. He told us he had amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS. He had hidden the diagnosis for 9 months. The weakness had begun in his left hand and was moving upward. "I have 2 daughters," he said. "The youngest is 6. I am not dying before she remembers me." Cam's expression hardened. "This thing does not heal. It moves death from one bed to another." Dr. Wren glanced toward the patient rooms. "Everyone in this building is already dying." I hated him for saying it. I hated myself more, because I had used the same words to excuse my silence. From room 12, Mother began to sing. It was an old lullaby she used when I was a child. Her voice had been too weak to whisper the night before. Now it traveled clearly through the closed door. Cam placed the 7-knotted cord in my hand. "Ask her whether she wants it gone," he said. "But do not ask as her nurse. Ask as the daughter who will have to believe the answer." Mother stopped singing when I entered room 12. Calm remained outside. Dr. Wren watched through the narrow window in the door. I sat beside the bed and asked Mother whether she knew what happened to Donald Reese and Mrs. Calder. She studied the black cord in my hand. "That man put ideas in your head. Their organs are gone. They were dying. That isn't an answer." Mother turned toward the snow, pressing against the window. "It's the answer you gave yourself." The words struck harder because they were true. She told me the Phi Pop had first come to her at the county hospital. A woman in the next bed died shortly before midnight. Mother woke, choking, and saw a dark shape crouched on the dead woman's chest. It had no face, only a mouth opening and closing like a wound. When Mother gasped, the shape entered her. For weeks, she remembered nothing but dreams of walking through other people's rooms. Then, she began waking with unfamiliar memories. A first kiss in a red pickup truck. A son's graduation. The smell of a kitchen she had never entered. She also woke stronger. "At first, I thought God had given me more time," she said. "Then I tasted a man's liver." I wanted her to sound horrified. She sounded ashamed. That distinction gave me hope until she took my hand. "Claire, I am not ready to disappear. I don't want to become a photograph you stop looking at because it hurts. People are dying. People in a hospice." Her fingers tightened around mine. Mrs. Calder had hours. Reese had less. The thing took what their bodies were already throwing away. Is 1 month with your mother worth less than 1 hour of their pain? I could not answer. That was the horror of it. Part of me wanted her arithmetic to make sense. Mother looked toward the wall separating her room from Marley Suvan's. "The next one has a weak heart," she whispered. "It can smell her." I pulled my hand away. "Tell it no." "It doesn't speak to me in words." "Then how did you stop me from entering Mrs. Calder's room?" Mother's face changed. Not into anything monstrous, that would have been easier. She simply stopped pretending. "Because if you had interrupted it," she said, "I would be dying again." Outside, Calm's sister began coughing. Mother closed her eyes and inhaled deeply, as if smelling dinner from another room. I wrapped the black cord around my fist. "Calm can remove it tonight." "And if I refuse?" "Then he says it will keep feeding until no one here is left." Mother's eyes filled with tears. "You mean until no one here is left, except me?" She asked me to leave. At the door, she called my name. "When the time comes," she said, "you will tell him I want it gone." "Do you?" Mother looked at her hands, steady for the first time in months. "I want you to tell him that." There were 4 of us still able to move through the storm. Calm, Dr. Wren, Danny Rusk, the overnight orderly, and me. Danny was 24, kind, and cursed with asthma severe enough that he kept a rescue inhaler clipped to his badge. He knew nothing about Phi Pop. We told him the patients had been exposed to a dangerous contaminant and needed to be moved into the old chapel. He did not question us. He carried oxygen tanks through the dark while snow hammered the stained glass windows. Calm prepared the ritual in the laundry room beneath the chapel. It was the warmest place in the building and had no exterior windows. He placed an earthenware pitcher in the center of the floor. Inside it rested a deer heart Danny had stored in the staff freezer for hunting bait. Calm warmed it in water until steam rose from the muscle. The smell traveled through the vents. Every patient began moaning at once. Mother sat on a wooden chair inside a circle of salt and crushed citrus peel.
7 black cords extended from her wrists, ankles, throat, waist, and chest. Calm tied the loose ends to iron pipes around the room. "When the spirit leaves," he told me, "her pulse may stop. Do not mistake emptiness for death." "And if it tries to return?" He showed me a syringe Dr. Wren had prepared. Enough morphine to stop a healthy heart. "If your mother welcomes it back, the body must be closed before the spirit enters." He placed the syringe in my hand. Mother watched me slide it into my pocket. Dr. Wren stood by the door, flexing his weakened fingers. "If the vessel works," he asked, "what happens to the thing inside it?" "It is buried where no sick person sleeps," Calm said. "Could it be transferred?" Calm stepped close enough that their faces almost touched. "If you open your mouth to this hunger, Doctor, it will spend the rest of your life teaching you what else you are willing to open." At 3:03, Mother fell asleep. The fluorescent lights turned red, not dim, red, as though blood had filled the glass tubes. Her abdomen lifted from the chair while the rest of her remained still. Something moved beneath her skin, traveling upward. Her ribs opened wider with each breath. Her throat swelled. Then her jaw dropped. A black tongue unrolled from her mouth and touched the floor. The Phi Pop pulled itself along that tongue. First came a woman's head with Mother's grey hair, then shoulders thin enough to pass between her teeth. The rest had no stable shape. Ropes of translucent organs hung beneath it, beating and twisting in the air. Human faces appeared across those organs, each one chewing the next. It smelled the deer heart. Then it smelled Mali upstairs. The spirit turned toward the ceiling. Calm began to chant. The 7 cords snapped tight. Mother's body jerked awake. "Claire," she gasped. The Phi Pop froze halfway between the pitcher and the vent. Mother looked at the syringe in my hand. "I want it gone," she said. Calm tied the first knot. The spirit screamed. He tied the second. It dropped lower, drawn toward the heart. By the 5th knot, half its body had folded inside the pitcher. Mother began crying. "Please believe me," she said. "I want it gone." Calm looked at me. He had heard the lie. So had I. "Does she reject it?" he asked. This was the moment the ritual depended on. Not a magic word, not the strength of a healer. The truth, spoken by someone who loved the host enough to recognize it. Mother shook her head at me. Upstairs, Mali Suvan's heart monitor began to alarm. I thought of Donald Reese, Mrs. Calder, my mother's warm hand around mine. Then I lied. "She rejects it," I said. Calm tied the 6th knot. The black cords caught fire. The fire raced toward Mother's body. Calm seized the final cord and pulled, but the Phi Pop tore itself from the pitcher. The deer heart burst against the wall. Every face inside the spirit opened its mouth. Mother screamed, "Let me back in!" The thing flew toward her. I held the syringe above the port in her IV line. One push would stop her heart before the spirit returned. Mother looked at me through the burning cords. For 1 second, she was not a monster or a patient. She was the woman who taught me to swim, who worked 2 jobs after my father died, who sat beside my bed whenever winter storms frightened me. "I'm still your mother," she said. I could not press the plunger. Dr. Wren could. He knocked the syringe from my hand, kicked the clay pitcher apart, then stepped between Mother and the spirit. He opened his mouth. Calm shouted for him to close it. Dr. Wren inhaled. The Phi Pop changed direction. It entered him like black water pouring down a drain. His throat expanded. Shadows moved beneath his skin. For several seconds, his entire body shook. Then, his left hand became still. The tremor was gone. He lifted a broken length of iron pipe from the floor with the hand ALS had nearly taken from him. "You said it moves death," he whispered. "You never said it couldn't be aimed." Calm answered, "So does a fire." Wren struck him across the head. Mother collapsed. The color drained from her skin so quickly that bruises appeared along her arms. Her tumor pushed against her ribs again. Whatever strength the Phi Pop had given her vanished with it. I crawled to her. Dr. Wren locked the laundry room door from the outside. Through the small glass panel, he told me he needed only enough food to survive until morning. The hospice still held 4 living patients. "They have ours," he said. "I have daughters." Then he turned off the oxygen to the chapel. Danny found us 10 minutes later. He used a fire extinguisher to break the glass and reach the lock. Calm was conscious, but bleeding badly. Mother could no longer speak. Above us, patient alarms sounded one after another. We reached the chapel in time to see Dr. Wren standing between the beds. He looked healthy. Too healthy. The patients did not. Their skin pulled inward beneath their ribs as if invisible hands were hollowing them out. Wren moved from bed to bed, breathing through his open mouth. With each breath, dark threads rose from their bodies and entered him. Calm threw the last unburned cord around Wren's throat. Wren turned and struck him again. Danny tackled the doctor. They crashed into an oxygen cart. Wren threw him aside with enough force to crack a wooden pew. I found the morphine syringe beneath my coat where it had fallen through a tear in the pocket. Wren came toward me. "Claire, your mother understood," he said. "A dying person is a sinking ship. Why let the food drown with it?" I drove the syringe into his neck and emptied it. He laughed. Then his knees gave way. Calm told us to keep Wren awake. If the new host slept, the Phi Pop would leave again. We slapped him, shook him. Danny injected a stimulant from the emergency cart. It did not matter. Wren's eyes closed at 4:12. His jaw opened. The spirit rose from him larger than before, swollen with the organs of the dying. It had Mother's face, Wren's hands, and a long spine made of human teeth. Calm dragged himself in front of it. The clay vessel was broken. 6 cords had burned. There was nowhere left to imprison the thing. So the old healer made a vessel of himself. He took one breath, then he opened his mouth. The Phi Pop rushed inside him. Calm fell at my feet, convulsing. He pointed toward the basement's old medical waste furnace. "Before it roots," he managed to say. Danny and I carried him downstairs. Calm remained conscious while we laid him on the steel loading tray. He tied the final cord around his own throat and placed the loose end in my hand. "Do not let anyone breathe into me," he said. I reached for the furnace switch. Then Calm's heart stopped. Danny reacted before I could stop him. He pulled Calm from the tray, tilted back his head, and gave him one rescue breath. Something black passed between their mouths. Danny's body went rigid. His inhaler fell from his badge and rolled beneath the furnace. Calm's eyes opened for the last time. He looked at Danny, then at me. "Not him," he whispered. The final cord in my hand went slack. Calm died at 4:26 in the morning. My mother died 9 minutes later with her hand inside mine. Dr. Wren never woke. By sunrise, 4 patients were dead. The remaining 2 survived only because the Phi Pop had been interrupted before it finished feeding. Danny remembered nothing. He sat on the chapel floor while snowplows cut through the entrance road. When the paramedics arrived, he told them Dr. Wren had suffered a psychotic episode during the power failure. He said Calm died trying to protect the patients. Both statements were true. Neither explained the missing organs. North Pines closed 3 weeks later. The state blamed contaminated equipment, falsified records, and Dr. Wren's concealed illness. My nursing license was suspended for administering the injection that killed him. I accepted that punishment. I had killed one man. My silence had killed more. Danny visited me before leaving Redwater. He brought the cardboard box from my locker and said he was sorry about Mother. He looked exactly the same. Kind eyes, nervous smile, a small scar on his chin from falling against the furnace. Only one thing had changed. He no longer carried an inhaler. "Cold air doesn't bother you anymore?" I asked. Danny drew a long breath and held it. "I guess something good came out of that night." Behind him, a woman in the apartment hallway bent over with a coughing fit. Danny's nostrils widened. For a fraction of a second, his shadow turned toward her before he did. I asked where he was going. He told me he had accepted a night position at St. Matthew's Children's Hospital in Minneapolis. I called the hospital. I called the police. I told them he was dangerous. They heard a disgraced nurse accusing an innocent man of carrying a spirit that ate human organs. No one stopped him. That was 11 months ago. Since then, 9 critically ill children at St. Matthew's have died after sudden, unexplained organ failure. Danny Rusk has not missed a single shift. Every morning after one of those deaths, he is photographed leaving the hospital without a coat, no matter how cold it is. I am sitting across the street from St. Matthew's now. In my pocket is one syringe. On the passenger seat are 7 black cords I tied myself. I am not a spirit healer. Calm made that clear. I do not know how to expel a Phi Pop. I only know how to recognize the body it returns to before dawn. The lights on the pediatric floor just went out. A moment later, something pale crossed the roof. Danny is asleep in the staff lounge. His body is empty. And this time, there is no one here to tell me whether killing it will stop the monster or only leave the monster looking for another open mouth. Claire entered North Pines believing death was the enemy. By morning, she had learned that the fear of death could be far more dangerous. Her mother accepted other people's final hours to purchase more of her own. Dr. Wren saw helpless patients and calculated how long their lives might extend his. Claire recognized the truth, yet remained silent, because love made the first sacrifice seem almost reasonable. The Phi Pop did not create their desperation. It simply gave that desperation an appetite. What would you have done in Claire's place? Would you have ended your mother's life during the ritual, knowing it might save everyone else? And if you saw Danny sleeping now, would you use the syringe before his wandering spirit returned? Share your answer in the comments. Thank you for listening to MC Noctis. If this story followed you into the dark, please leave a like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more scary stories, horror stories for sleep, creepypasta, dark folklore, and first-person supernatural horror. Until our next night together, keep the lights low, listen carefully to the vents, and never assume the person sleeping beside you is still inside their body. Good night. And if someone you love becomes stronger each time another person dies, do not call it a miracle.